gave the rich control of our democracy, and it's up to us to take it back. We must get money out of politics. Go to movetoamend.org to find out how. School districts all around our country are doing more to make sure kids aren't going hungry. Thanks to a pilot program running in 13 states, more than 1 million children now receive dinner and a healthy after-school snack as part of their free lunch program. The goal of this program is to make sure that all kids have access to a healthy dinner, especially those who come from low-income communities. Making sure that children have enough to eat is one of the most important things we can do to ensure they get a good education. And providing healthy food is one of the best ways to fight childhood obesity. Far too many children in our nation are forced to skip dinner, and many more aren't provided with any nutritious options. In the richest nation on earth, we can afford to do better, and feeding kids a healthy dinner seems like a common sense place to start. Here in the U.S., we're known for working hard, but some of us may be working ourselves right to an early grave. A new article by Alexandra Bradbury over at Alternet says that we need to think more about more than just adding more jobs to our economy. In fact, Ms. Bradbury says, I think we need less work. After learning about Maria Fernandez, a fast food worker who died last year while trying to juggle 3 jobs, Alexandra realized that our problem isn't that we don't have enough work, it's that the work we have is not being shared among those who want it. Instead of one person working 60 hours or more, that job could provide a 30-hour job to 2 different people. To do this, our nation would have to demand higher wages and a stronger social safety net, but we have the money to make this idea a reality. For many of us, our work is our life, but that doesn't mean we should give our life just to get enough work. Most lawmakers refuse to fight for single-payer health care, but most voters say that they should. According to a new poll by the Progressive Change Institute, more than 50% of those surveyed said they would support a single-payer Medicare-for-all health care system. In response to Vermont's Governor Peter Shumlin's recent decision to abandon his state's plan for a single-payer system, the Progressive Change Institute conducted this poll to get a feel for public opinion. Out of the 1,500 likely voters who were questioned, more than half supported single-payer, and that even included 1 out of every 4 Republicans. Although Governor Shumlin and other lawmakers say that we can't afford single-payer, we already spend way more on health care than other developed nations that have national health care systems. In fact, we would likely save money by switching to a Medicare-for-all type system. This new poll shows that Americans know we need to get the profit motive out of health care, and now we've got to push our lawmakers to make that happen. And finally, if New York Governor Andrew Cuomo gets his way, low-wage workers in his state will be getting a raise. At a recent press conference, Governor Cuomo proposed raising the minimum wage in his state to $11.50 in the city and $10.50 in the rest of the state. Although the proposal calls for a lower wage than Governor Cuomo called for last spring, it would still be a substantial increase from the current rate of $8.75 an hour. In order to become a reality, this pay increase would have to win approval in the New York State legislature, which includes the Republican-controlled state Senate. Business groups are already making the Republicans' argument by warning that higher wages will cost the state jobs. However, that claim is not supported by the data in the 14 states that raised wages just in the last year alone. Those states actually saw better job growth, and the higher wages improved the lives of millions of workers. A higher minimum wage would likely have the same effects in New York State. So let's hope that New York legislators help Governor Cuomo give workers a raise. And that's the way it is for the week of January 26th, 2015. I'm Thom Hartmann on the Economic and Labor News.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. I see a battle fully joined right now. I see echoes of 1800. I see echoes of 1920. The Koch brothers are raising $899 million. 2 people, with the help of 300 other rich folks, to essentially subvert American democracy. This is very similar to what was happening in the United States in 1799 and during the John Adams presidency. During the John Adams presidency, we saw basically small d democracy sliding away. The most visible point, of course, was the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. This was all the 1790s. And it was reversed by the American Revolution of 1800, Thomas Jefferson's election. And, Dan Sisson wrote the book on that, the American Revolution of 1800. That reversed our slide toward oligarchy. We had another slide toward oligarchy in the 1920s when Harding was elected in 1920 on a platform of more business in government, less government in business, right? Deregulate and privatize. They deregulated the banks in the early 20s. The stock market exploded, and then it crashed in 1929. But the oligarchs had complete control, or large chunk of control over the American economy and the American political process during that period of time. Let us remember what Vice President Henry Wallace said on April 9th, 1945 in the New York Times. I know I bragged on this at some length yesterday, but I want to go into a whole lot more detail on this today. Vice President Henry Wallace said, "They claim to be super patriots, but they would destroy every liberty guaranteed by the Constitution. They demand free enterprise, but they are the spokesman for monopoly and vested interest." Now, you tell me that the people in that room with the Koch brothers are not the spokesman, and the Koch brothers themselves, for that matter, are not the spokesman for monopoly and vested interest. Their final objective, the Vice President of the United States said in 1944, their final objective, talking about the economic royalists, the fascists in America, actually was the word he used. Their final objective, toward which all of their deceit is directed, is to capture political power. Now listen to this very carefully, because this is what happened in California over the weekend. And this is what's going on all across the United States, is to capture political power so that using the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously. See, these guys already control the power of the market in the United States. What's the one thing that regulates the power of the market? What's the one thing that can restrain the power of the market from essentially destroying democracy, not to mention the middle class? The one thing that can hold that back is the power of the state, right? Their final objective, Vice President Henry Wallace wrote in the New York Times, April 9, 1944, their final objective toward which all their deceit is directed is to capture political power so that using the power of the state and the power of the market simultaneously, they may keep the common man in eternal subjection. Now, what does eternal subjection mean? Well, that's an interesting one. Zed Jelani wrote an interesting piece over at Alternet. It's published, I believe, yesterday. He said, following the 2014 elections, Republicans gained more power in state legislatures than they've had in their party's history. This goes all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. Republicans control 69 of the 99 different state chambers in the country. More than at any time in the history of America. And I would submit to you that the reason why is because of money from the Koch brothers and other billionaires aligned with them, associated with them, or thinking the same way they do. Big corporations. You can track this back to the Powell Memo in 1971. In 1980, David Koch ran for Vice President of the United States on the Libertarian ticket and lost. And now, he wanted to be Vice President. Now he simply wants to control everything. He arguably has a hell of a lot more power than any vice president ever would have had right now. So what are they doing with this power in the 69 of the 99 state legislatures? They're quoting Zed Jelani's piece, GOP's frightening plot to build laboratories for plutocracy in states they control. You see, this is an existential battle for the future of democracy in the United States, for the future of the United States. Are we going to be a plutocratic nation, or are we going to be a middle-class nation? That's the question. Yesterday, when I left here, a little after 3:00 in the afternoon, Eastern time, I hopped in an Uber car to go over to my chiropractor's office. My back went out a couple days ago, and I've got a really great chiropractor. So anyhow, I'm on my way over there, and the guy who picked me up has got Michael Savage playing in his car. Full volume. It reminded me, that Michael Savage is a brilliant talk show host. He really is. It also reminded me of the value of personal narratives, because he was telling stories, which he does so well. But the thing that had me almost choking was his periodic insertion of gratuitous attacks on, and straw man attacks on progressives. Say, well, and progressives don't want you to have this, and progressives are going to destroy the country, that sort of thing. There is a right-wing propaganda infrastructure in the United States that is large and real. It is the talk radio infrastructure and Fox News. Fox News is owned in large part by two billionaires, Rupert Murdoch and Saudi Prince Al Walid. These two guys own Fox News. So you've got Fox News as the official voice of plutocracy. I mean, it's owned by two billionaires. You've got the Republican Party now owned by two billionaires, the Koch brothers. So anyhow, back to the states. He says, last year, Republicans introduced a flurry of religious freedom bills designed to legalize the ability of a business to discriminate. For example, a diner refusing to serve gay people. Number one. Now, this is the sort of stuff that they use to get you to vote for them if you're a bigot, if you're afraid of gay people, if you're a homophobe, right? This is slicing and dicing the electorate. But the real goal is, for example, attacking labor organizing. In Wisconsin, Republican lawmakers are advancing a so-called right-to-work legislation, writes Zed. In New Mexico, Republican Governor Susan Martinez has no such reticence in endorsing right-to-work of her GOP lawmakers. At even a lower level in Kentucky, numerous individual counties are advancing this anti-union legislation. Next, cutting taxes on the rich, starving their states of revenue. Sam Brownback blew a hole in his state finances by cutting income taxes, Zed Jelani writes. But the rich saw all levels of income saw a reduction, but the rich saw their taxes cut almost in half. That resulted in a budget deficit of nearly $1 billion. How is Brownback going to pay for that? Cutting $127 million from schools and delaying pension payments. In Texas, Senate Republicans are pushing for another $4 billion in tax cuts. In Maryland, where Republican Larry Hogan won, they're soon going to get this. Hogan set plans for, quote, an array of permanent long-term budget reductions for public schools, private colleges, libraries, and economic development aid for farmers. Now, this goes from the Koch brothers all the way to Davos. I want to share some thoughts on Davos with you in a few minutes as well. But this is, we got a serious problem here. A serious problem.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
At least the American middle class has a serious problem. We've slid, the middle class has slid below the 50% line, and it's getting worse. It's going to get a lot worse. Just to revisit this rant from yesterday. It's, I started out this thing, and keep in mind, fascism is the merging of state and business enterprises. Now, over the weekend at the Koch brothers retreat, you had a bunch of business enterprises people getting together and basically deciding how to take over the state. Now, back in 1944, the New York Times asked Vice President Henry Wallace, to quote Wallace, the New York Times asked him, quote, to write a piece answering the following questions. What is a fascist? How many fascists have we? How dangerous are they? And here's what he said. And just think about, the by and large, the right-wing network of radio stations across the country,